Lightmap baking, the hidden performance stacks nobody warns you about. Hello and welcome to episode number 10 of the Unity Performance Task Force podcast. I'm your host, Ruben from TheGameDev.Guru, and as usual, I'll kick things off with a question for you. Have you ever added Lightmap baking to your Unity project, marveled at how gorgeous it looked, shipped it, and then watched your frame rate nosedive on actual hardware? Sounds familiar? If so, this episode is for you. See, everyone loves to show off their beautiful baked lighting, Instagram-worthy screenshots of ambient occlusion, soft shadows, and gorgeous global illumination bounces. But here's what they don't tell you. Lightmap baking isn't free at runtime, not even close. Yes, you're moving lighting calculations from runtime to bake time, that's the whole point. But you're also introducing textures, lots of textures. And textures mean memory, bandwidth, draw calls, and all the performance headaches that come with them. So today we're going to pull back the curtain on Lightmap baking performance. The settings that matter, the traps that kill your frame rate, and the practical rules you need to ship beautiful lighting without tanking your game. Let's start with the big question: do you even need Lightmap baking? The answer depends on two things. First, do you need high quality lighting? If you're making a 2D casual game with flat shading, you probably don't. Second, are you already paying a lot for real-time lighting calculations? If your fragment shaders are crying because you have 10 dynamic lights bouncing around, then yes, baking some of that offline makes sense. But here's the thing. Lightmap baking is a trade. You're trading bake time and runtime texture costs for fewer real-time lighting calculations. It's not a magic win button, it's a performance budget shift. And if you get the settings wrong, which most people do, you'll pay more at runtime than you saved. So let's talk about what Lightmap baking actually is. At its core, Lightmap baking is simple. You calculate lighting offline during your build or in the editor. You use all the time you want. You can even throw ray tracing at it if you're fancy. Then you save that lighting information into textures, called lightmaps. At runtime, your fragment shaders sample those lightmaps and combine them with your materials. The result? You get ambient occlusion, soft shadows, global illumination bounces, all the good stuff, without doing expensive lighting math every frame. Sounds great, right? And it is, when done correctly. Here's an example. Imagine a scene with a dozen colored lights, all casting soft shadows and bouncing light off surfaces. If you calculated that in real time, especially on mobile or VR, you'd be in trouble. But bake it once, store it in a lightmap, and your fragment shader just reads a texture. Way cheaper. Except, and this is the big except, lightmaps come with costs. Let's break down the three main performance hits. First, draw calls. Lightmaps are textures. If Unity generates multiple lightmap textures and your objects use different lightmaps, you break batching. Every time you switch lightmaps, that's a potential draw call. More lightmaps equals more draw calls equals more CPU overhead. Second, memory. Lightmaps live in memory. The more lightmaps you have, the higher resolution they are, the more uncompressed they are, the more memory you eat. And when you eat memory, you also increase loading times. Nobody likes staring at loading screens. Third, bandwidth. Your fragment shaders have to fetch texels from these lightmaps every frame. The more textures, the more fetches, the more memory bandwidth you consume. Bandwidth is precious on mobile and integrated GPUs. Waste it and your frame rate drops. So the goal of high-performance lightmap baking is simple. Get the visual quality you need while minimizing lightmap count, memory, and bandwidth. And that comes down to 5 critical settings. Let's go through them one by one. Setting number 1. Lightmap count. This is the number of lightmap textures Unity generates. The more textures, the worse your batching, the higher your draw call count. Lightmap count is controlled by two main parameters: max lightmap size and lightmap resolution. Max lightmap size is how big each lightmap texture can be. If you set this to something tiny, like 32 by 32, Unity can't fit much lighting information into one texture, so it creates a ton of textures to hold everything. Bad idea. If you set it to something reasonable, like 2K or 4K, Unity can pack a lot of objects into one lightmap. Fewer textures, better batching. Lightmap resolution controls how detailed the baked lighting is. The higher the resolution, the more texels Unity generates, the more space it needs, the more lightmaps it creates. There's also padding, which controls spacing between objects in the lightmap to prevent bleeding artifacts. More padding means more wasted space, which means more lightmaps. And there's directionality. If you enable directional lightmaps, Unity generates 2 textures per lightmap instead of 1. That doubles your texture count. Directional lightmaps give you better lighting quality, especially for normal maps, but they cost you. So here's the practical rule. Start with a max lightmap size of 2K. If you're targeting high-end platforms, go 4K. If you're on mobile, maybe stick to 1K or 2K depending on your memory budget. Keep lightmap resolution as low as you can tolerate visually. Start at 2 or 4 texels per unit while iterating, then bump it up once you're happy with the look. And only enable directional mode if you actually need it. If your lighting looks fine without it, skip it and save the texture count. Setting number 2. Lightmap filtering. Lightmaps are textures, so everything that applies to texture filtering applies here. Filtering is all about how the GPU samples texels when there's no perfect one-to-one match between texel and fragments. Your camera moves, objects scale, and suddenly the GPU has to decide which texel or blend of texels to use. You've got 3 main filtering modes: point, bilinear, and trilinear. Point is cheapest but looks terrible. Bilinear is the sweet spot for most cases. Trilinear costs more bandwidth but gives you smoother transitions between min-map levels. In my experience, bilinear filtering is good enough for lightmaps. Stick with that unless you're seeing bad visual artifacts when the camera moves, in which case you can try trilinear, but expect a bandwidth hit. There's also anisotropic filtering, which helps with steep angles. The higher the aniso level, the more expensive the sampling, so use it sparingly. And that brings us to mipmaps. Mipmaps are smaller variations of your texture. When you're far from an object, the GPU samples a smaller mipmap instead of the full resolution texture. This is huge for performance. Generating mipmaps increases your memory usage by 33%, but the GPU performance gain is worth it. You're touching smaller textures, using less bandwidth, and getting better visual quality because the mipmaps are pre-filtered offline. So enable mipmaps for lightmaps, always, unless you have a very specific reason not to. And if you're using mipmaps, bilinear filtering works great. Trilinear smooths out transitions between min-map levels, but again, it costs bandwidth. Test it, measure it, don't just assume. Setting number 3. Lightmap compression. Lightmaps can be massive. Multiple textures, high resolution, lots of scenes. If you don't compress them, your build size and memory usage explodes. The question is which compression format to use. The best quality is no compression, but almost nobody can afford that. Uncompressed lightmaps are huge. So you compress. Unity gives you a simple toggle, compress lightmaps. Turn it on, and Unity picks a compression format based on your platform. On Android, that's usually etc2. But you can override it. Go to the lightmap texture, switch to the Android tab, and pick a different format. ASTC is usually my go-to. It tends to have better size to quality ratio than etc2. That said, some developers report visual degradation with ASTC Lightmaps, so test it. Compare ASTC 6x6, ASTC 8x8, and ETC2. Look at the visuals, look at the file size, pick the best trade-off for your project. And remember, texture compression is platform-specific. What works on Android might not work on iOS or PC, so test on your target hardware. Setting number 4, Mixed Lighting Mode. This is the big one. Mixed lighting mode determines what gets baked and what gets calculated at runtime. Unity gives you 4 modes: subtractive, baked indirect, shadow mask, and distance shadow mask. Let's rank them by performance cost, cheapest to most expensive. Subtractive is the cheapest. You bake as much as possible, including direct lighting and shadows. At runtime, Unity just samples a texture. That's it. The downside? Visual quality is poor. You lose specular highlights, dynamic lighting response, all the things that make lighting feel alive. Next is shadow mask. Here you bake shadows and indirect lighting, but calculate direct lighting at runtime. This gives you nice specular highlights and better visual quality, but costs more than subtractive. Then there's distance shadow mask. This is a hybrid. Close to the camera, Unity renders shadows in real time. Beyond a certain distance, it uses baked shadows. More expensive than shadow mask, but you get better shadow quality up close. Finally, baked indirect. You only bake indirect lighting. Everything else, direct lighting, shadows, is calculated at runtime. Most expensive, but highest quality. So here's the practical advice. If you're targeting mobile or VR, shadow mask is usually your best bet. You get decent visuals without the crushing cost of real-time shadows. If you're really tight on budget, try subtractive. If you're on high-end platforms and need the best quality, baked indirect might work. But measure. Always measure. Don't trust theory. Profile your game on your target hardware and see what actually happens. Setting number 5. Lightmap streaming. This one's a bonus, but it's huge for memory-constrained platforms. Lightmap streaming works just like texture streaming. Instead of loading the full resolution lightmap into memory, Unity loads the mipmap level you actually need. If you're far from an object, it loads a small mipmap. If you're close, it loads a bigger one. The benefit? Lower memory usage. You're only keeping the data you need in RAM at any given moment. The cost? A bit of CPU overhead to calculate which mipmap level to load, and some I/O cost to stream textures in and out. But in most cases, it's worth it, especially on mobile. To enable it, go to Project Settings, find the Streaming section, and turn on Lightmap Streaming. Then make sure your lightmaps have streaming mipmaps enabled. In recent Unity versions, this is on by default, which is great. Just be aware, if you're already bandwidth limited, streaming can add overhead, so test it. But for most projects, it's a net win. Alright, let's address some common objections. Objection 1. But baking lighting takes forever. True. Baking can be slow, but you do it once, offline. Runtime performance affects every player, every frame. Pick your poison. Objection 2. My scene is mostly dynamic, so lightmaps don't help. Fair. If nothing is static, lightmaps won't help. But if even 30 or 40% of your scene is static, baking that part can still save you a ton of runtime costs. Objection 3. I don't have the memory budget for lightmaps. Then you need to compress aggressively, reduce resolution, or skip lightmaps entirely. But remember, real-time lighting costs performance too. You're always paying somewhere. The question is where. So here's your action plan. Step 1. Decide if you actually need lightmap baking. If your game is 2D or has very simple lighting, skip it. If you're paying a lot for real-time lighting and you have static geometry, baking makes sense. Step 2. Set your max lightmap size to 2K or 4K depending on your platform. Start with Lightmap resolution at 2 or 4, then bump it up once you're happy with the visuals. Step 3. Enable mipmaps. Use bilinear filtering. Only switch to trilinear if you see bad artifacts. Step 4. Compress your lightmaps. Test ASTC versus ETC2 on mobile. Pick the format with the best size to quality ratio for your project. Step 5. Choose your mixed lighting modes. Shadow mask for mobile and VR. Baked indirect for high-end platforms if you need the quality. Step 6. Enable Lightmap streaming to cut memory usage. Step 7. Measure everything. Open the frame debugger. Check your draw calls. Profile memory. Test on your target hardware. Don't trust defaults. Let's recap the 3 most important takeaways. 1. Lightmap baking trades bake time and runtime texture costs for fewer real-time lighting calculations. It's not free, it's a budget shift. 2. The 5 critical settings are Lightmap count, filtering mode, compression format, mixed lighting mode, and streaming. Get this wrong and you'll pay more at runtime than you saved. 3. Always measure on your target hardware. Theory is nice, reality is what ships. If you want a second pair of eyes on your Lightmap setup, or if you're hitting performance walls and need someone to dig in, we do focused performance audits and training sprints at TheGameDev.Guru. We've seen these patterns across indies and AA studios, and the fix is usually smaller than people think. If you found this podcast episode useful, you can access in-depth lessons in the Unity Performance Task Force program at www.performancetaskforce.com. And if Unity Consulting is what you are after, book a free discovery call at https://consulting.thegamedev.guru. Till next time.